Hi everyone, it's Angela from Business Sense. We are here today with Collette from DRG. Hi Collette.
Hi Angela.
Thanks for chatting to us today. We're going to be talking about an article that Collette has written on harassment in the workplace. A very important and hot topic, and it's coming out tomorrow in the new Business Sense. So we're going to start off, Collette, with a very simple question. What is the reason that led you to write this article?
So Angela, DRG is an employer of record. We've got a broad base of clients locally and internationally. And what we find is writing these type of touch point articles really support our clients with understanding on a very practical level how to deal with quite complex legislative issues. And so as opposed to going to the Act and trying to work their way through the Act, which sometimes is quite ambiguous, I like to put together these articles where a client can read and get a holistic view and understand practically how to approach the topic. And of course, should they require further detail, they can always contact us or go to the HR person.
Right, so the article revolves around both aspects, from the employee and employer.
That's correct, because it's important for us to support the employer, and it's equally important for the employee to be productive and stay employed.
Yes,
the employee.
correct.
Yeah.
Especially in these times, right? We all need to understand what is going on. And also, what is harassment?
Harassment impairs dignity. It creates a hostile workplace, and it damages the workplace for the employee that's affected and for other employees that are involved.
Right. And the word harassment implies that it's ongoing. So if it's just one isolated incident or ongoing behavior, what is the difference around that?
Well, harassment can be a single event,
okay,
or it can be repetitive, ongoing, and can carry on for years. Right. And the misconception is that, I've allowed these insinuations to go on for years. I can't now report it to my employer because they will say, I brought it on or I participated. But in those instances, the employee would then just need to say no. I need to report this to the employer, and an investigation will be conducted. But to answer your question, it depends on the seriousness. If it's a once-off event, and that's subject to the employer conducting an objective and fair investigation, and obviously the evidence that is presented by the complainant.
Okay. So, what different types of harassment are there?
So there's the physical harassment, as we all know it, and often people that believe that that's the only harassment that exists, when someone either sexually harasses you,
somebody
touches you inappropriately.
Okay, right.
So there's psychological and verbal harassment,
yeah.
and so what we've also seen now, that there's broader conduct that now is included in what we understand harassment to be, and those are, for example, sabotaging another employee.
Okay. Right.
Using your power to coerce a particular situation, intolerances to disability, slandering an employee, pressurizing an employee to resign. So those
Wow.
are all encompassing of harassment. Talking behind an employee's back, and creating an environment where other employees are almost bringing on that negativity towards the employee, almost like
wow.
a mobbing.
Yes, manipulating.
Yeah, intimidating.
Okay.
The employee. That is all encompassing of harassment.
Okay. And so what do I do if I feel like that I'm being harassed? What are my steps at work?
So remember that the Act speaks about it is the duty of the employer to create a safe environment for the employee. And when the employee no longer believes that environment is safe, the employee needs to speak up.
Okay.
So what the employee needs to do practically is tell someone.
Right.
And if they aren't able to tell someone in the employment, either someone on a senior level, in a managerial position, they are to put it on paper and in writing. And that's possibly the easiest thing, is to put it in writing. Sometimes employees tell their colleagues, who then tell HR or tell the line manager. So definitely tell someone in a senior level that this is what is happening to you, and so that the employer then can take the necessary steps to conduct an investigation and to support you in the way that their company supports an employee going through this type of situation.
And what if I create a report, or I tell somebody and people don't believe me or don't take me seriously? What can I... Because that might intimidate even further.
Angela, this is the thing, and that's the reason why a lot of employees don't report harassment. Because first of all, it sometimes is the senior manager, and nobody's going to believe me. He's been here for 20 years, I've been here for 6 months. Nobody's going to believe me, I'm embarrassed. Maybe I said something that implied, maybe I responded in a way that, led someone to believe X, Y, Z. So maybe I brought it on myself, which makes it less credible.
Right.
But the employer is obligated to conduct an investigation. The employer has to provide a safe environment for you, a safe workplace. So the employer has to conduct an investigation, a fair investigation into both versions, and the evidence will explain and provide support to your story.
Yes.
And likewise, the impact on perhaps your performance. You may be an exemplary employee, and then for the last 7 or 8 months, your performance has hit rock bottom. You're absent a lot more. They can see it in the way you dress. You've become a bit
conservative
or quiet in personality.
Yes,
so
the change of behaviour.
Impact on employees.
Yeah.
So the employer would need to conduct an investigation to understand if in fact your version is true, or at least what they're going to do in terms of preventing harassment in the workplace and eliminating harassment in the workplace. And it is the duty of the employer to ensure that they conduct awareness programs, train their employees, train their managers on how to deal with harassment, explain to the employees what harassment is, what is defined as an harassment, so that norms are established within the business. Because we all come to the workplace with our own understanding of what we believe is acceptable, but that may not necessarily be acceptable in the workplace. The workplace has to establish acceptable norms and unacceptable norms, and harassment is an unacceptable norm, and that is where the employee needs to understand where their behavior is inconsistent with what is deemed to be acceptable. And so obviously putting together policies, procedures, consistently applying disciplinary codes, and an approach to dealing with harassment in the workplace.
Okay. I know that this subject is talked about a lot on a national and a global level. So from your experience, you work with international customers. Are the rules or the laws different in South Africa to other countries?
Yes, of course. So every country is governed by their own legislation.
Right.
The South African law would not have jurisdiction in any other country. However, we deal with employers who sit on the other side of our borders, their employees sit in South Africa.
Yes.
And so the best way we can support that international employer is to provide the South African legislation as a parameter and support the employer using the South African legislation. We cannot manage a South African employee on a policy that is written using legislation from Denmark.
Right.
You know, so that is why we provide those parameters that are provided within the legislation in South Africa, but that doesn't mean to say that an employer in Denmark can write a policy that speaks to how they deal with sexual harassment, for example, or harassment in the workplace.
Because the employee is here.
The employee is here,
Right.
but they obviously, as the employer, they will need to have a policy that speaks to harassment for their company and all their employees, wherever they sit in the world. However, what we need to be careful of, and they need to be careful of, rather, we need to support them in, is understanding that where their policy is inconsistent with our legislation. For example, it might say, in their legislation might, for example, say, report the harassment immediately to your closest police station, just as an example, where that's not what our legislation says. The employer, it's an employment relationship.
Okay.
We need to deal with it. So that's where we provide guidelines to support how they're going to manage that situation in South Africa.
Collette, how does harassment in the workplace legislation apply to South Africans working remotely and being employed by somebody out of this country?
So DRG is an employer of record. So what that means is that we provide a compliance vehicle for an international employer who employs South African employees.
In South Africa?
In South Africa, working remotely for an international employer.
Okay.
What we do as an employer of record is provide the employer with support using the South African legislation, because that is what is going to govern the rules of the land.
Right.
We cannot, for example, if the employer sits in Denmark, we cannot use the legislation in Denmark for a South African employee, albeit that the employer has already written out policies and regulations and has rules of their company which the employee has been inducted to. However, in terms of managing day-to-day supervision of the employee in terms of the legislation, we would then utilize the South African legislation and support the employer in understanding what the South African legislation is and managing misconduct and performance using the parameters which are provided by the legislation.
Because the employee is sitting on South African soil.
That's correct.
Okay. So that kind of sums that up.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Collette, this article is coming out tomorrow. We're all very excited to read it. It's going to be online on businesssense.com and on kzntopbusiness.com. And thanks, Collette, for filling us in. It's been very interesting.
Thank you
I
very
can't
much
wait
for
to
having
read
me.
it, guys. And you'll see it out there. Otherwise, contact Collette Tanner at DRG for more info. Thanks and cheerio.
Thank you.